Hi, everyone. This is Mike Koenigs, and this is the peptide expert, Regan Archibald. What are we going to talk about today, Regan?
Today, we're going to be talking about peptides, regenerative treatments that can help you look your best, feel your best, and perform your best.
Okay, very good. And I think a great way to get this this video started is talking a little bit about some of the books that folks like Dr. David Sinclair, Tony Robbins, Peter Diamandis, Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Benjamin Bickman, Ben Greenfield, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
What do these people know about increasing health span and lifespan that most people don't know, and what have you been studying over the past few years?
I think what most people don't realize is that we're at one of the greatest times to be alive because of the technologies that are there. There's safe treatments. There's things that have been proven over the course of, in peptides, 100 years. And so we know that there's a bypass to help you live, not just live longer, but live more fully with the life that you've got.
Right. And I'm going to just say that for the record and for the sake of you watching this on camera, if you don't know who I am, I've been working with Regan Archibald and his team. I've been going through his programs, going through his treatments, his diagnoses, and I'm here really as an advocate. And my goal is to ask him a lot of the questions that you'd probably want to know about extending your life, eliminating pain, gaining more energy, just feeling more vibrant and vital as well. So in case you're wondering that, I at least wanted to let you know that right off from the start. So why don't we dive into this?
Yeah, so imagine that you walk into a room and you've got 3 fish bowls. And one of the first fish bowls you see, it's dirty, the water's murky, the fish looks really sick. The second fish bowl is pristine. The fish is swimming around, it's got a lot of energy, vitality. And then the third fish bowl, you're like, well, the fish bowl looks clean, but there's something off with the fish. Now, what are we going to do and how can we help the fish? And if you look at health, one of the things I realized early on is that fish bowl that's very dirty, where the fish is not thriving, one of the things that we do is we say, well, the fish is sick, let's give the fish some medication. And so that fish could be on, omeprazole for his acid reflux, maybe some Prozac for his depression or Cymbalta. Maybe the fish is on hypertensive meds for his high blood pressure, right?
This is a crazy fish we're talking about here.
It's and the fish is just like drooling out of the side of his mouth, like, please help me. But then you look at the other fish in fish bowl number 3. This is where people get stuck. This is the trap in medicine, because in medicine, we wait until things are too far gone before anything is done. And so that fish that's not looking so well, you go to your doctor over and over again, and your doctor says, let's wait and see. I'll see if these markers look worse next time you come in. And by the time the symptoms show up and the lab markers are elevated, it's already too late.
Right. So this is a lot of this is for folks who are undiagnosed. They might feel like something's going on, or in many cases, the symptoms are asymptomatic. Symptoms haven't shown up yet, but what you know is you might feel stressed, overwhelmed, overweight, you're losing your edge, lack of energy, not sleeping as well, not recovering as well. You really notice it. You could go out where in the old days you may have been able to have a couple adult beverages, for example,
right,
recover the next day, be fine. Now 1 or 2 and you feel like you're wrecked.
Yep.
Or you notice after you eat some sweets, you really get low. Or you start noticing when you eat certain foods, you have more reactions. So there's clearly something going on, but you can't put your finger on it.
That's it. Yeah, and in over 4,687 labs that we've ran, we've found that there's basically 4 different types that show up in these labs. And these types are, we have the overachievers, whether they're entrepreneurs, they're executives, they're, running architecture firms, law firms. But these overachievers show up in a certain way, and we tend to see very specific patterns in the labs. We have the family boss. We see where the mom who's, has, in some cases, 12, 13 kids. Yes, in Utah, we do have big families. So, but that puts a lot of burden on the health of that individual. We also see, kind of the professional who's a little more ADHD. I'm going to get around to it. They push themselves for decade after decade after decade, and then they come and in their 50s and their 60s, that's when they hit a wall, and then they have to finally confront their health, because you can only ignore it so long, and pretty soon either you have a cardiovascular event, a diagnosis like cancer, something that really makes you stop dead in your tracks.
And full disclosure, that was me. I started working full time when I was 16 years old, very much like you. Grew up in a very small town. Hard driving, built and sold a company, always running away from fear of running out, fear of not having enough. And I was diagnosed with stage 3A colorectal cancer when I was 46 years old. Just about killed me, but I went through major surgery, chemo, radiation, and I ignored the warning signs. But it wasn't until a big warning sign showed up where I was bleeding that I finally got it looked at. And if I would have had these tools, if I would have been properly diagnosed, if I would have known what to even look for or listen to, it would have saved myself, but more importantly, my family, an enormous amount of anxiety. And you just, the worst thing you ever want to do is watch someone you love go through this.
Yeah.
But also, if you've been on the receiving side of an older parent or someone you love going through a major health situation, it's horrible and it's unnecessary. And that's a big part of why we're making this video today.
Yeah, I think people don't realize what tools they have and what capabilities there are. And so one of the things that you can do right away is look at your blood labs. Because, we have a mantra, we love playing guessing games, but not when it comes to your health. So we test, we don't guess. So one of the things that we look at differently is we take your lab values and we narrow those down. And the reason we narrow the lab values down is so we can find an optimal level. And without having an optimal benchmark, then essentially you're just waiting for disease patterns to show up. And then once you're treating a disease, it's too late. So some of the markers that we find that are most commonly off, especially in our busy entrepreneurs, the people who are pushing themselves hard, we see that blood sugar can be elevated. Hemoglobin A1C, C-peptide, the insulin fasting. And you can start to get symptoms like, shakiness if you're not eating. You can get hanger. You can even get little skin tags. A lot of our patients with insulin resistance also notice that they need an afternoon nap. And you feel a sense of euphoria after you eat, which makes it really hard to stop eating the sugar and the junk food because you're always hungry. You're basically, your biology is running you when you've got blood sugar issues.
Right. And so in that case, what are some of the other conditions that you see in the tests? And then what typically will you do about that after you go through the diagnosis? Like, what will you tell people to do? What will you provide them? And what kind of results can you expect?
Yeah, so we'll look at cardiovascular markers, kidney function, look at your sodium potassium ratios if you have your labs in front of you right now. That can give you a good indication if you're facing burnout, if you're too stressed. We'll look at all the thyroid markers. We don't just want to look at TSH or T3 or T4. We want to look at your thyroid peroxidase antibodies, all those silent killers that we don't realize are there. We'll look at the immune health. We'll also look at all the hormones.
And much like, I know for a lot of us, especially if you're super busy, you've got a lot going on. First of all, we just start ignoring these. It's very, if you're like most entrepreneurs, you'll say, yeah, I'll get around to it, or it's not important enough. There's always a reason why you can't.
Right.
Until finally the symptoms and what shows up in the panels collide, and that's when you've got a real problem.
Right.
So this is a way to prevent an enormous amount of pain, and the investment in time all in, let's say to get your blood tests done, and then to meet with your team and get the readings is about how long?
Oh, it's no more than 2 weeks. I mean, we'll send a phlebotomist to your house if necessary. You can find a local LabCorp. It's very easy to get it drawn. Once your results come in, we run it through a very sophisticated software, and you'll get a 36-page report. We'll show you all the nutritional deficiencies. We'll show you the health of your kidneys, your cardiovascular system, hormones, liver, everything. And then we'll show you where the real interferences are in your health.
Okay. And I'll sort of answer my own question, which is, if you go to a LabCorp, for example, they're usually right next to where you live. You drive, they do the test. You're in and out of there usually in about 20 to 30 minutes.
Fast. Yeah.
If you have a phlebotomist come to your home, I've done a Zoom meeting while I was giving blood before. But the point is, they're in and out of your home less than a half an hour, and your team takes care of that. And then the time you spend actually providing the reading, providing a diagnosis, and what you should do next is about how long?
That takes about 45 minutes to an hour.
Great.
Yeah.
So figure it like this. This is less than an hour and a half of your time, of your life, to potentially extend your life, save your life, or someone you love. And I wanted to get that out of the way. So let's look at the next test that you typically look at.
So the other test we look at is called metabolomics, and it's not a well-known test. A lot of doctors don't run this, even though it's got heavily research studies behind it. But this is where we can look at oxidative stress, all those things upstream that cause breakdown in the cardiovascular system. We look at mitochondrial dysfunction. So if you're wondering why your energy is not as good as it used to be, that will give us an indication as to why. We'll look at your fatty acid profiles that will help with your memory, your brain health, your joints, every little lubricant in your body. We'll also look at toxic exposure. So have you been exposed to lead, mercury, or other heavy metals? And then probably one of the most important is the methylation imbalance. So how well do your cells metabolize and process waste? And if you're not processing, and what's called methylation, if you're not processing waste properly, you end up with inflammation in your body.
Okay. So if we were looking at that that test again, if we go back to it, we've got a 7 for oxidative stress, a 9 for mitochondrial, a 6 for inflammation, a 7 for toxic exposure, 7 for methylation. When you look at these, is this like a pretty typical individual or a pretty common busy professional?
This is it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What we find is people are redlining their health. And so pretty soon a part's going to break. And sometimes when it breaks, it can be devastating.
Yeah. And in this particular instance, the mitochondrial, in other words, these people, they're probably feeling burnout, overwhelm, stress, anxiety. Their sleep isn't very good.
Yeah.
And they're just in this cycle of, I got to get off this hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. This particular patient, complete IBS, weekends were spent in bed because his digestive system was so wrecked.
Yep. Okay. Let's go on to the next one then.
Yeah. So the other thing we want to look at is your hormones. So stress response. Cortisol is one of those hormones that regulates the circadian rhythms in your body. And so we do this by saliva, and through the salivary testing, we can predict where your body's cortisol levels are the most out of balance. And this is important because it is what will determine your testosterone levels. So a lot of men, what happens when we get low testosterone? We get irritable, we get moody, but it's grumpiness. The grumpy old man, we joke around about it, but I think it's one of the most serious things that you can have because they tend to have depression.
Yep.
And the depression shows up as irritability. Once we fix their testosterone, they feel like a new human being again. And you know the feeling.
Yeah. And I'll speak to that. I was about probably around 52, and for the first time in my life, I was sad. Like I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what was wrong, but I was chemically depressed. And I got to the point where I genuinely felt suicidal. I wasn't like ready to take action, but I had a horrible time going to sleep, staying asleep, and I woke up scared. I started crying a lot. I was super emotional. I lost my courage, and I for sure lost my edge. And when you're that way to your spouse, you become less attractive, which is going to make you more grumpy.
Yeah.
You start noticing you put on weight. You start engaging in activities to cope that are not common or typical. But more importantly, you don't realize that you've lost yourself.
Right.
And I remember I was so afraid because I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know what to talk about. I just knew I didn't feel right. I didn't really know something was wrong. It's like the frog in the boiling water. The frog can't tell he's in boiling water. It just didn't feel good.
Yeah.
So I can totally speak that when I started doing hormone replacement, it took about 30 days and I had my edge back, my memory back. That's another thing that goes. I was happy again, had my drive, got my courage back, had the fire that my wife fell in love with in the first place as well. And I just came back to feeling like myself again.
Man. Yeah, it's life-changing. And so the other lab we run is a digestive lab. And this gets missed a lot in hormones. There's a pathway called beta-glucuronidase. It's really critical. And so this pathway helps you unconjugate certain hormones, and it's especially important for estrogen metabolism. But we'll look at dysbiosis, maldigestion. Do you have inflammation in your gut? Is there dysbiosis? All these markers are really critical because we can start fine-tuning these pathways with the right peptides.
Okay, so I'm going to try to decode that. It just comes down to if your gut feels rotten, maybe. Does this mean like bloating, gas, you're not processing, you just don't feel like you've got the same energy any longer?
That's
or
it.
You might have IBS or some other
Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. Yeah, so really what this is that fishbowl, the fish that's just not feeling quite right. You may not have any digestive issues, and we run your digestive panel and we'll say, here's why your hormones aren't working. It's from your gut. It has nothing to do with your adrenals or nothing to do with your hypothalamus or pituitary. So it's really just for us to get the right area targeted.
Right. So this is one of those situations where you could actually have a good diet, be eating right, but your body's not absorbing the nutrients and using them properly.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next up.
Yep. So three things that we do. Number one, we analyze, we optimize, and then we transform. So we have to find out where the inflammatory patterns are in your body, where you've got energy leaks, where the tiredness is, and then where the toxic interferences are. And so once we do that, that's where we really start to maximize energy. And the people that we work with, we take them through this 3-phase process. It's a 7-month program. The first phase is where we go through the reset. And so this reset is where we take the stress that you've been accumulating over the years, and I've never met a single human who doesn't have it, and we just disengage that stress response. We create so you're less reactive. We help disengage what's called the amygdala. That's the part of your brain that can fly off the handle or you can run scared. And so the second phase is what we call the recharge. So a reset phase is all about feeling your best. The recharge phase is now looking your best. So this is where we dive into the gut. We help optimize the amount of DNA health that you've got. We also help give you a nice little energetic boost, and you'll start noticing your muscle changes, your body composition changes. And this is where, there's specific peptides for each one of these. The third phase is restore, and this is where we're restoring metabolic flexibility, activating better cognition, maximizing hormone health. And the purpose of this is so you can reclaim your confidence, your lifespan, and your relationships.
Very good.
So this is a patient who had a great experience with us. And he's similar to who we've been talking about today. So
let's play it.
Go ahead and play that.
Hi, I'm Cam Sproul from Heber City, Utah. Wanted to share my experience with East West Health and Regan Archibald. I must say I was a skeptic at first. I didn't believe that vitamin supplements and kind of more of an Eastern medicine approach to health was a real thing. But once I met Regan and got to learn a little bit more about his approach and how his team works, I was compelled. One of the things that really kind of made sense to me is the very practical way that they approach the treatment plan. And it starts with, kind of an interview and a baseline understanding of your actual blood panel. So it's kind of irrefutable evidence, of where you're lacking in nutrition, and that really guides his team in how best to treat you as a patient. I was able to really get a ton of benefit out of the entire experience, not just the supplements and peptides. I also did acupuncture and some other therapies that his team delivered, and couldn't be more happy with the results. I feel better than I ever have. I'm turning 50 next year, and feel as good, if not better, than I did back in my 20s. I'm riding further and further on my mountain bike. I'm able to climb Mount Timpanogos every year. It's just been, a godsend, and totally worth my investment in my health. I've noticed other benefits as well, just in terms of how it's impacted me in my relationships, my ability to handle the stress and pressures at work. And, I attribute a lot of that to, the good guidance that I've received from Regan and his team.
Do you ever feel like you're overwhelmed, anxious, and you can never get ahead?
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we've discovered, and you probably can relate to this, Mike, but we find that 85% of energy is spent on anxiety and overwhelm. And when people look at doing something for their health, they say, how am I ever going to fit this in?
Yeah, I don't have anything left to do this.
I can barely hold it together with my family, my business. And so what's going to happen if I do a program like this? So imagine what it would feel like if you were in your 20s or your 30s or even your 40s. Think about a time in your life where you have really amazing health, because right now 85% of your health is given to someone else. It's all used to take care of external things. So imagine if you could have some of that life back.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we find in people who work with us. After phase 1, they start noticing that their head gets above water. They start feeling less overwhelmed. They realize that getting healthy is not as complicated as they imagined it to be. In fact, they find that it's easier, and they actually have more time because they have more energy that they can put into what they're doing at work and finish things faster, so they're more productive. But what we find after phase 1 is you now have about 40% of the energy that's yours. So you're like, okay, now I'm in the fight. After phase 2, we find that number increases to about 60%. So now your 60% is yours. Your energy's coming back. You've got, the Eye of the Tiger song playing, right? You're like, hey, I'm recharged. I'm feeling good. And then that phase 3, that restorative phase, this is when you start capturing as much of the energy as possible. 80, 90% is yours now. And that feels empowering because now you've got the momentum that you need to get your health to the next level.
That's awesome. I'll speak to this as well, because not long ago, I felt like that too. I didn't realize that almost all my energy was being stolen from me. And again, as you age, you don't even know or feel it going away, except you just feel worse and worse and worse. So imagine if you didn't know that you could have a full bank account, 85% of what you produce is being taken from you, taxed, literally. Yeah. And then by going through the diagnosis and going through the process, which I've been through with you now, you get tools, resources, boxes, a coach, and you just start feeling better. And so, like you said, after phase 1, you're going to get a big chunk of energy back.
Yep.
2 months after that, you get another chunk, and you just start feeling better. And after phase 3, you got a lot more of you back, and that's when you get into the heavy-duty optimization, where I can tell you now, after working with you as long as I have, which isn't even a full half a year yet, I'm feeling like I'm in my 30s again. My energy is so high and so regular, and it's because of the diagnosis. It's the customized treatments. It's the tools and the feedback.
Yeah.
So being able to talk to someone and say, here's what I'm feeling like, here's what's going on, and here's what you should do next. And with the modifications, because we've modified my program at least 2 times, I think 3 already, in a short period of time. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to that, but I think that's a very important part of this. It's what the future of healthcare is: customized, personalized healthcare.
That's it. Well, yeah, you reached out and you said, hey, what are some great peptides where I can just get trimmed down a little more? Mm-hmm. I said, well, you're already doing great. You're putting on muscle mass. And so that's where we said, let's try semaglutide. and you got on semaglutide, and I'll let you share it so I don't violate any.
Sure. Yeah. No, I can do it. I'm happy to share, and we'll show a picture. But I cut about 15 pounds over a period of, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks. I think less than 6 weeks, and it's the most painless, effortless weight loss I've ever done. And I have very little body fat right now as a result of it. And it is literally take a shot once a week, and you're not hungry, cravings go away, and you just start losing weight. And the best thing is the sign when you walk by your own mirror and you look inside, and who's that? Ugh. And then you realize it's you.
Right.
And then this last weekend, I was with my wife of 22 years, and she looked at me and said, "You look good." I was like, "Yeah, baby, that's the nicest thing that can ever happen when your spouse says something like that." I was like,
right.
She made me blush again, you know?
Yeah,
it's like,
that's great.
So it is, like I said, it's painless. You don't have to do any work, and you get the benefits from it. And I know that this is a safe, proven tool that's also extremely affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing what can happen now. And semaglutide, something like that peptide, has made it through the FDA clinical trials. It's been shown to be very effective for weight loss, for even diabetes. It's got cardioprotective functions. So, yeah, very, very fascinating.
All right. So how can someone get started working with you? What's the process look like for someone to begin? How do they know, first of all, if they're a right fit? And then let's just talk about getting the process going.
Yeah, so I think the best way is, very first, we got to get the right tests. And so typically that's a blood lab. We have very specific markers that we're going to want to run for you. And so you can go to thepeptideexpert.com, and we'll have all the instructions there. It's easy. You can click a button. You'll get scheduled. We'll get the phlebotomist, everything ready for you. And then you and I, or you and one of my team members, will meet, and we'll put an entire program design for you and give you the peptide structures you're going to need for each 3 phases of care. And you're off to the races.
It's great. And I can tell you, as a client, as a customer, it took less than an hour to get the full reading. I was in after 10 minutes. Part of the experience, and what I've watched over and over again, because I've introduced a lot of people to you, is your team cares. They're knowledgeable. They know exactly what to do. This is one of those things where you look at the report and you can tell what's going on. And if you don't feel it, you look at the data, and there is a solution for it. This is a beautiful paint by numbers process. That doesn't mean it's easy. There's a lot of factors here, but after almost 5,000 labs that you've done, you know precisely what to do and how to get results, and do it quickly, and also do it in an order that's safe and restores the most important parts of the person first. You know, you're not going to put the cart before the horse. Yeah. And you feel remarkable in a short period of time. And this is a no pressure situation. It's just a conversation with people who genuinely care.
Yes. Yep. That's it. Simple, easy. The people who it's not for is probably the ones who, you know, they think age is an excuse for poor health habits. They don't want to really make changes. They're not open to a brand new approach. Maybe they're not really serious about extending their lifespan and health span. They don't really have a future to look forward to. Mm-hmm. Those are the hardest ones to work with. But no matter where you're at, if you feel like, man, I'm 60 pounds overweight, I've tried so many different things, nothing's worked. My cardiologist tells me there's no way I can ever run again or do anything, that will elevate your heart rate. Even if you've been told that your blood sugar can never be stabilized, we've seen these things get improved. And so no matter where you're at, come on in. Even if you're fit, healthy, or a biohacker already, I bet we can find some fun things to work on. Yeah,
I've seen that myself when I brought in groups. We've discovered folks who've had health challenges. They seem perfectly fit and healthy, and you've discovered things that had either gone unnoticed or they're asymptomatic.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is very important, and I'm speaking from experience here, this is something where if you have a resistant spouse, this is something where when they see what you do, if you're the first one to get in and see the results, they're going to want to have a part of that too. Because
Right.
Vivian got enrolled because she's like, I want that too. And she's not overweight, but she wants to get more fit. But that's really what put her over the edge. And there were times when she was resistant to peptide and some of these treatments. And even my son's interested. I mean, he's young, but there's areas where he could be optimized. But this is one of those things, if you've got a resistant spouse, they can either watch you go through it, or your team is really, really good at educating both simultaneously. So the sooner you get your spouse, the sooner both of you are committed to your growth and your shift. It's going to give you more hope. You're going to definitely like each other better. It definitely is going to turn on the desirement lights again, or the desire lights again. There's so many advantages and benefits. So this is something that you can do as a family. And I think that's a very, very important thing to reinforce as well. So is there anything else that we should add before we wrap up here?
No, I think we've covered it all. Thanks so much, Mike. This has been awesome.
All right. It's my pleasure. So you know what to do next. Head on over to thepeptideexpert.com, get a hold of Regan and his team, and get your blood labs done as soon as possible.